In this video, I want to talk about my favourite rock guitar tones from albums that shapes the sounds that I try to achieve now, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and what albums and tones really did it for you. John Sykes showed up, plugged in his Les Paul Custom and basically said, make me sound like some kind of thunder god. And they did. This tone is unapologetically huge. It's perfection. Smooth saturation, high gain sustain, compressed but not neutered. It sings and punches in equal measure. You can feel the attack of every note. Thick, Messer Coliseum heads and rack mount delays and reverbs for days. John Sykes' tone on Still of the Night alone was a high point in arguably a decade that contained some of the best and most influential rock tones of all time. The first Blue Murder album carries on from where that left off, so if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend that you do. Michael Nielsen from Big Hairy Guitars recently did a video recreating the rack that John was using at the time. He really nails it. Oh yeah, and this video is in no particular order, so like I prefer tone example 2 to tone example 1, so I'm not really sure why I did it that way. I'm not trolling, I swear. Everybody's got a take on Nickelback, but that tone, it is undeniable. PRS into a rectifier, tightened up in post-production, mixed to dominate radio. Anyone remember radio? Say what you want about Nickelback, but they created the blueprint for that sound with this album, or at least perfected the recipe. The tone is dense and saturated, with the mid-scoops just enough to hit hard without losing any punch, but still giving the vocals room to breathe. The low end is tight but present, and the top just enough fizz to cut through that wall of drums and bass. As soon as the guitars kick in on Never Again, it sets the tone for the whole album, and from start to finish, they get that sound right. And whether you loved or hated them, this tone was everywhere in 2002. Turn on the radio and it hit you in the face. As much as I love the tones on Slippery When Wet and Keep the Faith, I think that Richie Sambora's tone on this album just slightly beats the other two, but there's not much in it. The lead guitar tones on Blood and Wild as the Winds are some of my favourite of all time. Those huge rhythm tracks that kick in on Stick to Your Guns are probably some of the biggest sounding open chords that I've ever heard. And the Fendery single coil tones on I'll Be There For You were like a small glimpse into the future of where Richie would be heading with his solo album, or even with his Fender signature guitar. And the gear for this album, who really knows? He probably had access to every piece of gear ever made up until that point in the studio. If anybody has any links to any kind of articles or has any information about it, please let me know down in the comments below, because I'd be really interested to check it out. Oh, and if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. It helps me make more of this kind of thing and more gear reviews, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And this one isn't just guitar tone, it's studio architecture. Mutt Lange built this thing layer by layer like a skyscraper of harmonics and delays. Every chord is doubled, every part is EQ'd like a pop vocal. The distortion, clean but saturated, precise and controlled. This was probably one of the first tones to really embrace the digital age and not run from it. I'm sure you already know about the album being recorded entirely or almost entirely with a Rockman. I still can't believe that I don't have one of the MXR versions that were released earlier this year. It was such an important tone for me. I would have bought one for a review, but I saw RJ's video and I was like, I'm not going to be able to add anything to that, so what's the point? The tones are perfectly polished, obsessively tracked, and they sound just as huge at low volumes as they do through like a stadium PA. I think there's a bit of a myth that Mutt made Steve and Phil play every note of every chord, note by note and string by string. And while that did happen, I think it was only certain specific parts, like the pre-chorus to Hysteria, so that all the transients of every note of the chords hit all at once. It's a masterclass in tone production, even if it did break a few purists' hearts. And it still sounds good nearly 40 years later. Adam D didn't just sculpt a tone, he created the heavy guitar gold for the following 10 years. Modern high-gain amps pushed with a tube screamer, post-EQ'd, and then quad tracks that could just cut through anything. Tight low ends, surgical mids, and zero noise. It's aggressive but never sloppy. Every palm mute is like a drum hit, and every chord is a precise strike. This tone was the blueprint for 2000s metalcore, and even now it still hits harder than tones 20 years later. Bands like God Forbid popularised this sound, and then Killswitch perfected it on this album. This sound was a huge influence on me, and maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I think that this specific sound, this moment, was the final nail in the coffin of the nu metal scooped tone that was the standard just a few years earlier. Again, I am not trolling with this one, but Jerry Finn somehow managed to capture this unbelievably refreshing sound that was both perfect and well produced, but still captured the energy and life of these riffs that were simple but full of attitude. There's countless hours of people online and in videos speculating about the gear that was actually used on this album. Fans analysing and coming up with theories based on just a few photos that we've got from those sessions. We're never really going to know 100% for sure. And if you don't know, Jerry Finn died suddenly in 2008 at just 39 years old. It's almost like AC/DC, where the guitars are probably way cleaner than what you initially think, but the power and the aggression are coming more from the hands than actually cranking the gain, and I think they managed to capture that in the recording. That's right, I just compared Blink to AC/DC on a guitar YouTube channel. This has to be one of the most overlooked guitar-based albums of all time, in my biased opinion. This is Sambora with a Strat and some more organic tones, although not the entire time, with some stereo delay and bluesy phrasing. It's expressive, vocal, and drenched in feel. Every note has space to breathe, and every lead line floats in this lush, moody atmosphere. It's like Gilmour meets Clapton with more edge and some Gary Moore thrown in occasionally. A little bit. Yet still not a million miles away from 1986 Slippery era Ritchie. And if you've never looked into it because you were put off by Bon Jovi, then maybe give this one a chance. It's a masterclass in lead tone that nobody really talks about enough. Gary Moore's Still Got the Blues marks a dramatic shift in tone, moving away from those hard rock roots, embracing a rich, expressive blues voice. Overall, I'm generally a much bigger fan of his hard rock stuff. I was lucky enough to be able to see him live quite a few times, and I don't think I was the only one in the audience wishing he'd play a bit more of his older heavy rock stuff. But this album wasn't just a stylistic change, it was a complete overhaul in how he approached guitar tone. And his guitar playing somehow became even more vocal, more dynamic, and more soulful. And the gear that he used played a huge part in bringing that to life. Although we could talk about his Greenie 59 Les Paul Standard, Marshall JTMs, and Tube Screamers that were used on this album, ultimately, Gary Moore's tone on Still Got the Blues wasn't just about gear, it was about how he played it. He used his touch, vibrato, and phrasing to bring that gear to life. But without that magic combo of vintage Les Paul, Marshall muscle, and subtle effects, that tone wouldn't nearly have hit so hard. Maybe. He could have probably played a Harley Benson into a Line 6 Spider and still sounded just as good. I love the first Alter Bridge album, One Day Remains. It was like Creed with better songs and the best singer in the world. But it felt like Miles Kennedy was fully embraced and accepted by the rest of the band on Blackbird. Because it's not just his vocals on this, it's his full sonic stamp. His writing is incredible as well as his vocals, obviously. But his playing was so different to Mark Tremonti's. Yet it somehow worked, and it made the guitar parts on this album so much more three-dimensional. And actually at the time, I didn't love it. Mark Tremonti definitely makes my list of top 10 guitar players. Top 5. Probably higher. And I didn't want to hear his tones diluted by somebody else, but as my ear developed, I realised how amazing it was. And it's actually one of the few times in my life that I've demonstrated any level of maturity by admitting that in this case, so don't get used to it. Tremonti's rhythm tone hits like concrete, but there's a clarity and contour in every downstroke. Kennedy's lead and arpeggio note choices are ethereal, melodic, even cinematic. Together, it's a two-guitar assault with depth and dimension. I can't believe it's been nearly 20 years since this album came out, but in my opinion, City of Evil was the album that made solos cool and acceptable again. High gain but clear, super tight, vocal sounding. These tones made me want a Bogner Ubershell more than anything else in the world. Well, this album and Mark Tremonti. It's relentlessly clean despite the gain, perfect dive bombs and harmonised leads, and those signature chromatic riffs. It was the first time that I'd ever heard anything like that. This was like modern metal tone 2.0, and it was just as obsessed with clarity as it was about the chaos. The tone from this album alone must have sold 1 million Schecter guitars. And yeah, I'm focusing more on the guitar tones for this video, obviously, but vocally and in terms of drums, this album was like a new benchmark for that as well. Yeah, I know. This is sacrilege, but this entire video is just my opinion. I prefer Van Hagar over Van Halen. I just do. And I know this is where my video retention graph is going to take a dive off a cliff. When 5150 dropped in 1986, it marks a huge shift in Van Halen's sound, and not just because of the new frontman Sammy Hagar, but also because Eddie Van Halen's guitar tone had evolved into something sleeker, more refined, and just more processed. This was Eddie's first full album using his new home-built Studio 5150, where he had full control over every element of the recording. The result was a tone that traded in some of that raw brown sound grit from the Roth era for a punchier, more layered production that still screamed of personality. Eddie's main weapon on 5150 was his Kramer 5150, which was a custom-built guitar that became iconic in its own right. The signal was run through a variety of rack mount gear like the Eventide H3000 harmonizer and some MXR stuff and the Soldano preamp, although the exact amps that were used on the album have long being debated. But the real secret weapon on 5150 was how Eddie started to integrate more keyboards and studio layering without losing his guitar's dominance. Tracks like Dreams and Love Walked In showcased his ability to blend atmospheric synths with searing leads, all while maintaining tight control of tone with studio accuracy. This album marked Eddie's transition from guitar hero to full-on studio architect. Zach has some of my favourite tones of all time. He's up there in my top 5 for sure. I didn't include him in this list because I wanted there to be a bit of variety. I could have easily filled up this entire list with 80s Les Paul players. Zach, John Sykes, Alden Over, Vivian Campbell, Steve Clark, Doug Aldrich, although I think he was more into the Superstrat thing back then, but anyway. That's my list, but let's be honest, you're probably already typing away furiously about Slash or Brian May, so go ahead, please tell me what I missed. Also, how cool is this guitar? It's a Badlands GX1 Pro. I think it's called Bengal Purple, maybe. I'm not sure. I may be leaking this because this might not be out by the time this video comes out. So if I am, don't tell anybody because I get in a lot of trouble. If it is out, then I'll put a link in the description. But anyway, I recently made this video here about why I think that amps are dead in 2025. Please check it out because I think you'll really like it. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.